September here for Boxing News, joined for the first time in a little while by WBC President Mauricio Sulaiman. We are here in Sin City, Las Vegas, ahead of Canelo Alvarez versus Jermall Charlo. Mauricio, been a while. How are you?
Good, good, good. Boxing news, huh? I love arriving in Heathrow and picking up my Boxing News magazine and see boxing so strong and present in the UK. I love it. I love it. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Mauricio. I'm working on making the subscription available in Mexico for you, so you can make sure that you get all of your boxing news every week sent to the WBC office. How's that sound?
Well, we could have all the Mexican fans that read English, maybe do a big pool and make it available in Mexico.
We can make it available in Spanish.
No, Boxeo Noticias.
There we go. There we go. One for afterwards. Let's have a chat, Mauricio. Let's have a chat. But yeah, I think this is the first time we've done an interview since the WBC Convention last year in Acapulco. Doesn't time fly in boxing?
Well, time flies and you are very busy. You forgot about your Mexican friend. We used to do the Zooms and we used to do all this. I thought you didn't like me anymore, so I'm happy to be here.
There's nothing like face-to-face interviews,
Absolutely.
Mauricio. It's been the first time in a little while that I've seen you face-to-face, but I'm glad that we're able to sit down and catch up. And let's start this weekend with Saul Canelo Alvarez against, well, long-reigning WBC champion himself, Jermall Charlo. Of course, WBC champion since 2016 as well. A great fight this weekend, undisputed versus undisputed. Looking forward to it.
Yes, it's a massive fight. It's a dream fight for Charlo. He's been waiting for this for a long time. His brother, Jermall, had been the major shining light of the two brothers. And this is Jermall's time. And he's going to do his best to prove it. And a win will change his life forever. He's very enthused. He's strong. He's powerful. He's motivated. And Canelo is crafty. Canelo is experienced. He is a boxer that is recognized around the world as the head of the sport. So it's going to be a sensational event.
You mentioned there about both fighters are very experienced in different ways. Obviously, Canelo started as a professional when he was very, very young, 15 years old in Mexico. Jermall obviously starting later, but both been world champions now for many, many years. Jermall, what were your early kind of recollections of the Charlo twins? They are, you know, over the years have been quite interesting characters, I think it's fair to say. Some of their in-ring and outside of the ring activities has, you know, caused headlines for good and bad. What's your kind of, your relationship and your experience with the Charlos over the years?
I like them both very much. It's a tremendous couple. They are twins and they love each other like all twins do. It's a special relationship. Right now they're going through a difficult family problem between them, but that's part of the life of everyone. I can be at odds with my brother, but they are special. To have twins being world champions, they've been dominating for some time, super welterweight and middleweight, and they're here to stay. They're a threat to Canelo. Both of them. One, you know, everybody thought it was Jermall who was going to do, but Jermall stepped in. I've been talking to Jermall. The WBC will stay supporting him during these difficult times, even though I have received very nasty emails and postings in social media about not vacating Jermall. All I can say is we're going to stay with him through the bad times, and he's going to make us proud.
Let's just carry on with there, since you've brought it up about Jermall, rather. Constantly making that mistake over the years. His status as WBC middleweight champion. It's actually something that we spoke about in Acapulco. I think Carlos Adames at the time was made interim champion. Of course, it's still a position that he holds. Do you understand the, I guess, criticisms? I guess kind of from my perspective as kind of a boxing fan first and foremost, just kind of trying to understand what's going on with the titles, what's going on with, I mean, I'm a Jermall Charlo fan, as many people watching this will be. I think first and foremost, we'd love to see him back in the ring, but also on the sporting side of the things, we want to see the sport progress. We want to see challengers get the opportunity to fight for titles. Do you understand why there is this kind of wondering about Jermall's status?
Yes, I do, but they failed to do a little research because the WBC ordered an interim title. Carlos Adames won the title, has defended it. He's going to be scheduled again. So there has not been a fighter who has been put aside or has been hurt by the WBC supporting Jermall Charlo during his mental health crisis. Adames is proud and he's happy and he's making a lot of money. So there's nothing. It's just some criticism. He's maybe going directly at Jermall, using the WBC as a pathway to downgrade him. You know, there are people that engage in social media. Jermall and Jermall have done that, and there's some sparring sessions in the Twitter, or the X as it's called now.
We've had in the past with the WBC, we've had champions in recess, champions, emeritus champions. Was there ever any conversations around that? It would seem to me, as kind of a neutral observer in all of this, that might be a kind of a fair resolution, and when Jermall is ready to return to the ring, that he could box Adames or whoever holds the full title at that point. Was that ever a discussion? Do you think that that's a reasonable outcome?
It was in a discussion, but when you are in a timeline right now, you look back and then it looks like a big picture. But if you cut it down to what really has happened, it is not that big picture. From his last fight, then there were negotiations and a signed contract to fight Sulecki. That fight was going to take place, I believe, May, and he got injured a week before the fight. So if you take that as a fact, you erase all that time from his last fight until that injury. When he started the injury process, about 3 months in, the WBC ordered an interim championship because he was injured, and it was a longer time for him to be back in the ring. So we had that, and Adames won the title. So then you shorten, that's another fact. And then he had the mental crisis that brought him down. That's the WBC decided. We spoke with him, with his team, with his family, and he said he did not want to be, he wants to feel the WBC champ. He wants to know he's a champion. He needs it. So we're going to stick with him. He's going to be back, and we're going to be proud of it.
Do you have any sort of idea as to a rough time frame for him to return to the ring? As I've mentioned, he is one of the best fighters in the world, certainly one of the best middleweights in the world when at his best. We all want to see him back in the ring, and again, coming back to kind of, I guess, the sporting perspective, we want to see titles defended and interim belts. I appreciate the need for them in certain instances, but we want as best as we can one champion.
Let me give you one example. Some people criticize the WBC, and they write about, oh, it's all about the sanction fees and the money. If he doesn't fight, there's no fees. So it's another piece of understanding. We have to have mercy and have to be loyal. So whoever is not happy about that, they will be happy with other things. So I hope he gets in the ring before the end of the year and he resumes his life and becomes and makes us proud. He's a great champion, a great human being.
But there's no time scale on that?
Not yet. I'm waiting to hear that, yes.
Just back to the main event. Thanks very much for that. Just back to the main event. Canelo Alvarez this week is kind of, we've seen various different sides of Canelo over the years. We've seen obviously the heated rivalry of Gennady Golovkin, the Caleb Plant fight kind of Caleb Plant is involved in a few altercations himself away from the ring sometimes. But we've seen this week where he's talked about Charlo has not respected his skills. And do you sense Canelo wants to prove a point? There's been all of this talk around, is Canelo the same fighter? And maybe 2 years ago he was a better fighter than he is now. Do you sense that from Canelo, that he maybe wants to put on a show this weekend, make a statement?
I feel so. He changed from doing camp in his home in San Diego he moved out and went on to do a camp in the Northern California. And maybe he knew he was feeling comfortable. He needed to get back to find the eye of the tiger, like Rocky says. And I think we're going to see a Canelo with some different features. It's a great match. Every time a Mexican against an American meet in the ring, it's a great possibility of a great fight, of fireworks flying out.
Canelo will make history this weekend if he is successful. He becomes the first man to defend all 4 belts as the undisputed champion 3 times, which is a tremendous achievement. But it does, as often is the case when you have an undisputed champion or a unified champion, does leave mandatories and X, Y, and Z kind of waiting in line, really. It's kind of the drawback of a superstar like Canelo. With that being said, David Benavidez, where does he fit with the WBC's timeline with regards to Canelo? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, as I'm sure you will, Canelo's last mandatory, I think, was Avni Yildirim. There hasn't been a mandatory since of the WBC at super middleweight. Is that something that the WBC would be looking at for next year?
Yes, David Benavidez is a mandatory contender. We have Canelo fighting this Saturday. Then Benavidez is fighting November 4th. So after November 4th, we have the WBC Convention. And that's where we're going to rule on every division. And we will see the result of these 2 fights, what is exact status, and then make the ruling for the super middleweight.
So it's going to be you and Samson Lukovitz again, duking it out for David Benavidez's status, right?
Well, Samson already, he went to pick me up in the airport asking about Benavidez mandatory.
Well, we look forward to seeing what happens there. I mean, what have you got planned for us in the WBC convention this year? Is Tashkent in Uzbekistan? We'll be there, of course, as we were last year in Acapulco. What have you got in store for us?
It's going to be a sensational convention because of the pandemic. The last 4 conventions have been in Mexico. It was Cancun, then the virtual convention during the pandemic. Then we opened the world on Mexico City, last year Acapulco. So we needed to get back to the world rotation. We're going to beautiful Uzbekistan. We're going to have tremendous working sessions. Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, Jeff Fenech, Chavez, Duran, Constasiu, Amir Khan. Many great fighters are going to be there. There's going to be a boxing match, boxing event. We have a good, solid agenda of topics of discussion. So it's going to be gratifying to have our convention and do a lot of work.
You mentioned there the workshops. I think that for me was part of the most interesting thing about going to the convention is understanding what goes on. And it's, you kind of hear, okay, so-and-so's been moved here to here, but you don't know and you don't see it. What have you got in store for kind of workshops this time? I know last time there was several things that were on the agenda. One was female boxing, one was the transgender boxing league. There were several other bits and pieces that were on there. What have you got planned for this convention?
We have a few topics of interest. We are putting much time and effort in officiating. Judges and referees, specific topics, specific matters on the training, on the mechanics, on the rules, on how we need to find accountability on the results. Unfortunately, there's a lot of resistance to change in boxing. The USA and the UK do not allow new rules, new concepts, new protocols. And that brings a setback on the growth of our sport. We must use technology to understand we are in 2023. We cannot be doing the same mechanic as 80 years ago or 100 years ago. And it's working. Hopefully, the open scoring is major. The headphones, noise cancelling headphones, the different scoring criteria. We're going to talk about the ring officials' medicals. We're going to introduce a new medical for fighters, a new mandatory medical, which involves mental health. So there's a lot of topics. I'm sure you will find our convention interesting and with very good things.
You mentioned there about kind of change, and boxing is forever a sport that's constantly changing. I think we're joined by Saul Canelo Alvarez, just running around over there. Quite a popular man here, but not as important as you, Mauricio, so we'll talk to you anyway.
I know. Look, everybody running to them.
Female boxing. So I sat sat in on the session with regards to female boxing, and 10 2-minute rounds as opposed to 12 3-minute rounds as we see in the male code. We are now seeing Amanda Serrano boxing 12 3-minute rounds. We saw Beatriz Ferreira box 3-minute rounds. Where does the WBC stand on that? As I understand it from last November with the WBC Convention, I listened to the medical suggestions, but for people who maybe weren't as involved in that, I guess, what can you tell us about that? Is there any plans to revisit that with potentially new evidence and new investigations, or is it something that is going to kind of remain the same from the WBC's point of view?
No, the WBC is firm on maximum 2 minutes, maximum 10 rounds on women's boxing. We have all the facts that we need. Unless someone can prove differently, we're not going to put any woman at risk. The reality is that a woman is different from a man, and this is not about equality, it's not about sexism, it's about safety. If you put in a skeleton, we're different. If we understand that there's a problem in the cervicals, if we understand that there's a much more concussion probability on a woman, if you understand the women have a hormone change and they have the menstrual period, so many differences, and we are firm on our rules that if you can tell me one woman with a speech impediment that we find, unfortunately, on some fighters, that's a perfect point. No woman, you see them, you talk to them, and it's a very different life after the ring from, unfortunately, the men.
So by that token, do you believe that 12 3-minute rounds for female boxing is unsafe, that you don't...
Absolutely unsafe. It's dangerous, and God forbid there's no accident. God help to establish order and respect to the authority, because we are living in an era of anarchy. Anyone wants to do whatever they want to do, and there are authorities permitting anything to happen. But if this leads for women to start fighting at a higher risk, I am afraid the consequences in 2, 3, 4 years, or maybe immediately, are going to be something that we will regret.
Are these concerns, reservations, something that you've shared with the heads of the other governing bodies? Daryl Peoples, Paco Valcarcel, and Gilberto Mendoza. Have you discussed with them? I know that you kind of meet semi-regularly and you do have regular communication with them. Have you voiced these concerns to them?
I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk about the others. I'm just, I cannot understand anyone being okay with such a risk of putting women to fight 3 minutes and 12 rounds.
Okay. The featherweight division, as I understand it, or the last time that I checked in, so to speak, Rey Vargas was still the WBC's featherweight champion. Of course, moved up to super featherweight, was unsuccessful against O'Shaquie Foster. Him against Brandon Figueroa, is that a fight that's already been ordered by the WBC?
Yes.
It's difficult to keep up with the...
We're waiting for the date for that fight to take place.
I haven't seen the poster. Until you see the poster in boxing, as you know, Mauricio, things can be very much up in the air.
Yes.
But a great fight, and again, another opportunity for there to be some clarity in the division as well, with an interim champion in Brandon Figueroa against the returning champion in Rey Vargas.
Yes, Brandon lost a very disputed fight with Fulton, and Vargas tried to move up in weight for a vacant title, lost with Foster. He's back in the featherweight, and we will see. It's going to be entertaining.
Moving ahead to the heavyweight division. We spoke briefly before we started here about Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou, about that's going to be taking place in October in Saudi Arabia. It's a fight that has, polarized opinion from fans, as much things do, particularly when it comes to the heavyweight division, and dare I say Tyson Fury. It's a fight where, people are not best pleased in the boxing space due to the fact that it is a reigning WBC heavyweight champion against an MMA fighter making his professional debut. From a health and safety perspective, do you understand that with regards to a seasoned elite heavyweight champion in Tyson Fury boxing a novice, really, in Francis Ngannou?
Well, combat sports make part of the criteria to evaluate a fighter. For example, the WBC Ratings Committee considers the Olympic cycle of a fighter. They consider if they are Muay Thai or kickboxing, that could have an effect on the rating of a fighter. Ngannou, I believe, is highly regarded as a powerful puncher, as a powerful superstar, and all the medicals have been accepted, and the truth is that Fury, he tried to fight Usyk, he tried to fight Andy Ruiz and Joshua, genuinely, and they wouldn't fight him. There's no mandatory because we order Wilder to fight Ruiz to have a mandatory contender, and they didn't fight. And we are not just going to jump in and appoint someone mandatory. The WBC is not going to do that. We need that the mandatory contender must be the highest, most qualified fighter for a stature like Tyson Fury. You said you were mentioning about the unified champions, and then they lose the titles because of mandatories. The WBC is trying to stay away from that. We want unified champions. The fans want unified champions, and we all should work together to keep the unified champions. But every organization has rules, agendas, and sometimes those are not in parallel to the others.
With regards to Tyson Fury and his mandatory status, his last mandatory defense was against Dillian Whyte, if I'm not mistaken, in April of last year. As I don't understand it with Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz. I know that fight was ordered. I think it was ordered at the convention.
Yep.
Last November in Acapulco. For one reason or another, we don't know. The fight didn't happen. Would the WBC not look down the list in something like that with Arslanbek Makhmudov or Frank Sanchez, one of the other top 10, top 15 rated WBC challengers and ranked contenders? Would you not seek to bypass Wilder and Ruiz if they can't make that fight to determine the mandatory challenger?
Yes, at what point we need to address it, but as I said, we're not just gonna do because we have to. We can order a tournament, that would be something that would be attractive, and then the winner of such a tournament becomes a real mandatory contender. I think there's tremendous talent in the heavyweight. Many great fights can happen, but they're not fighting each other.
One thing that I wanted to suggest, really, or kind of get your opinion on, I remember when when you were a fresh-faced president of the WBC, you ruffled a few feathers and raised some eyebrows by mandating Adonis Stevenson and Sergei Kovalev for a unified title fight. That didn't take place. Would that be something that you would ever look to revisit in the instance of Usyk versus Fury? Would you ever look, as the WBC president, to mandate that fight in order to try and, as you mentioned, we all want to see unified champions and undisputed champions. Would you ever look at something like that again?
We cannot mandate the champion of another organization to do anything. We took a stance and we mandated our champion to fight the WBO champion, and very unfortunately we were used by such promoter to negotiate a television contract for Kovalev. I believe they never had the intention to fight Adonis. It was a great fight, but it just simply didn't happen, and they didn't even have the courtesy to do something or explain something or try to make. They just simply stepped away from the fight and signed a 3 or 4 fight deal with HBO.
that be something that you would look to do with Tyson Fury in that instance then, just similarly as you did with Adonis Stevenson? Particularly while there has been this hold-up, particularly in the heavyweight division, it seems like the rest of boxing is really delivering for the sport at the minute. The heavyweight division, whether it's the lure of the money in Saudi Arabia, whether it's one reason or another, hasn't really had that this year. Would that be something that you would look at if you can't determine a mandatory challenger?
If the organizations do not have reciprocity among them, it's difficult. If we were to do something like that and then they react and they strip Usyk or they block the fight, whatever, it's difficult. We have good intentions moving with benefits for the sport, but at this moment it is not a solid group that can make the proper decisions for the betterment of boxing.
Following October with Fury versus Francis Ngannou, would that be on the agenda for November in the WBC convention, identifying, I guess, a route to a mandatory challenger for Tyson Fury, by which time it will be, well, certainly by next year when we'd expect him to return to the ring, sort of April time, will be 2 years since he served a mandatory challenger and certainly fulfilled his mandatory obligation. Is that something that would be high on the list of priorities with regards to Tyson Fury, identifying how we get to a mandatory challenger and have him fulfill that?
Come to the convention, you will see.
I will be there.
Yes, we're going to address every single division, see what is the specific situation. We don't know what's going to happen October 28th. So we will see and then make a ruling on every category.
October the 28th, obviously a non-title fight. It's not a WBC heavyweight title fight. So should, in my opinion, the unthinkable happen and Francis Ngannou knock Tyson Fury out, it wouldn't change his status as WBC champion, so it would kind of still be on the agenda, so to speak.
Yes. Tyson Fury is the champion before and after, regardless of the result.
Bridgerweight. Been a while since we spoke about Bridgerweight, Mauricio. One of your, how do I put it? One of your brainchilds, I suppose, of recent times, put forward by the one and only Don Majeski. That was on the virtual convention, wasn't it, where he'd made the suggestion around the Bridgerweight division. Just checking in on all things Bridgerweight, really. How are you kind of feeling about the division, the activity in the division? Is it more or less than you would have hoped for? Are you pleased with it? Are there still things that you want to look at?
Yeah, we have a good activity. There's going to be an interim championship taking place in South Africa. Why? Because when Badou Jack defeated Makabu, I'm sorry, that was cruiserweight. Rosansky
Babic
against Babic. He won the title, and he had to fight against the mandatory contender Lerena. But then they requested authorization to do a fight against Badou Jack, and they reached an agreement, and they agreed that Lerena could fight in South Africa. They needed to be for a world championship, and then both fight each other at the end. So that's happening. Good activity. November, December, good fights. Bridgerweight, every single fight is very interesting.
So you mentioned there about Badou Jack, who's of course currently the WBC Cruiserweight champion, so it would be the WBC's Cruiserweight champion against the WBC's Bridgerweight champion. Would Badou Jack, in that case, have to vacate his Cruiserweight title? Would he remain champion? And similar to kind of Ray Vargas, I guess, when he moved up to super featherweight?
We did order Cruiserweight. Noel Mikaelian had been waiting for a long time as mandatory. Makabu had a rematch with Badou Jack, so we order an interim title. They will fight. I'm sorry, a world title. We put Badou Jack in recess in cruiserweight, and he will decide what he wants to do after the fight against Rosansky.
So Jack would be made WBC champion emeritus, so champion in recess.
Yes, in recess.
Okay, right. Okay. Do you see why there's kind of the confusion? So Badou has the right as champion in recess. We spoke right at the start of the interview about Jermall Charlo. I know two very different situations, but one has a recess champion, one doesn't have a recess champion. Do you see why again kind of reciprocity?
Yeah, I explained. Badou Jack is active, and he's going to fight And Jermall, it's a humanitarian decision by the WBC.
Go back to this weekend, Canelo Alvarez. We were doing a huddle round the outside. Now I'm going to put you in an awkward position here, Mauricio. So I'm just going to prepare you before we get started. So he was asked what his Mount Rushmore of Mexican boxing was. Now I want to know what your Mount Rushmore for Mexican boxing is.
Well, it would have to have around 200 faces. It is hard to have a selection because boxing is about era. It's about the great legacy. Just like the UK, we have had so many heroes on the sport, and it's hard because everyone has their own magic. From Raton Macias in the 40s and 50s to Canelo of today and the future. So there's many, but there's some very special ones.
I won't nail you down for it. I'll let you off for that one. Who's the next Canelo? Because you've got Canelo who's kind of carried not even boxing, not even just Mexican boxing, but boxing in general, kind of on his shoulders very well over the period of the last 10 years or so. Been the cash cow, as he's called in the sport, the face of boxing. Underneath that, who are the kind of the young talents coming through from Mexican boxing? In my opinion, the USA, Mexico, UK, because I'm British, kind of need to be strong in order for boxing to be strong. With that being said, who are the ones coming up in Mexico? Who's going to take that mantle?
You never know. A hero is born from one day to the other. I see some talent. Pitbull Cruz is tremendous. David Picasso is a great prospect. There's a few others that can make it. I met a kid, he's 13 years old. He's marvelous. He could be a next Canelo. He's poor, he's very nice looking, very great charisma, and he can fight. So maybe that's a new Canelo.
Well, we look forward to seeing who the new Canelo is moving forwards.
El Güerito de Tepito.
What's that?
The blondie from the Tepito area.
Okay. Is that the nickname of?
Nickname of the kid.
Okay. Well, we look for. We'll play that one back in 10 years' time, Mauricio, when we're in Las Vegas. The final thing that I wanted to talk to you about was Dimitri Bivol and Artur Beterbiev. Now, I know you've spoken about it at great length in other interviews, so I don't want to kind of hammer down the point. But what's going on there with regards to obviously the situation in Russia and the Ukraine? There are, accusations of double standards with regards to Dimitri Bivol and Artur Beterbiev. Now, I know that's been put to you in the past, but we've not spoken about that situation since last November. Has there been any developments? Has there been any suggestion of change from the WBC stance on essentially granting Dimitri Bivol the right to box for a WBC title?
We have explained consistently several times that Bivol has to contact the WBC and put his case forward, explaining why should the WBC not consider him Russian. Because we do not allow any boxing in Russia or Belarus. We don't rank any boxers from Russia or Belarus, and we don't support any activity on a WBC fight involving those two countries. He has never contacted the WBC in months. And that's very simple. If he believes he's being mistreated or he should have a different status, and I've said it many times.
Are you okay, Michel? Do you need him?
¿Dónde están?
How long do you need? 5 minutes? That's okay. Do you need to go?
Que vengan.
How long you got?
No.
Okay, all good. Sorry, just picking it up there. I didn't want to keep you for too long, Mauricio. I know you're a busy man around these parts. On Artur Beterbiev, he did box for Russia as an amateur. He is, by all intents and purposes, a Russian fighter who has, of course, now got Canadian citizenship. Do you understand the kind of...
15 years.
15 years, beg your pardon.
He's been 15 years in Canada. He has passport, boxing license from Canada. His kids were born in Canada. It's a very different scenario.
So, Mr. Eddie Reynoso just joining us here. That's a very nice tracksuit. I like the tracksuit.
Nice color.
Get you a green one for the WBC. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, I think, Mishra, we're probably about there now. Always a pleasure to catch up with you. Before I let you go, as I often do, I'm going to give you the floor. Going to give you the final word. I don't let many people get the final word when I'm around, but I'm going to give it to you. What can you tell fans to expect around the world, at home in your beloved city of Mexico, your beloved country of Mexico, of course, and around the world, tuning in this weekend for Canelo versus Charlo?
I can just say thank you for your support. Thank you for sticking to a great sport like boxing. We're going through a great moment in the sport. When you have a list of so many to pick the pound-for-pound king, and you have Inoue, you have Tyson Fury, you have Canelo, you have the Charlos, you have Haney, you have Shakur, Kenshiro. I mean, everyone is pound for pound. And the great fights we have seen. 4 champions have lost the title and their undefeated status this year. It's a great time. As they say, showtime. This is the 3rd $20 million gate in 6 months. So boxing is there, and thank you. And I accept any critic. If it's done respectfully, we listen and we try to use it to improve.
There you have it. Mauricio Sulaiman, thank you as always for sitting down and speaking to me, speaking to Boxing News, and we look forward to catching up with you soon in Uzbekistan.
Thank you so very much.